think there's a general sense that we are under attack and that there may well be foreign intelligence involvement in some of these cases.
Do you think that? Let's hear now from Christopher Steele, who's former intelligence officer at MI6. Good afternoon, Christopher.
Hello there, Kathy.
What do you read into the involvement of counter-terrorism police? Because they are saying, well, there's no evidence as yet of foul play.
No, indeed, and we must hold judgment until we see what evidence does come out. The problem is that there's a concern at the moment that the Russians are conducting, through their intelligence services and proxies, kinetic operations, as we would call them, on British soil. We saw last March, for example, a warehouse in East London that had an incendiary device put in it that was supplying Ukraine with various goods and services. And the perpetrator of that, Dylan Earl, pleaded guilty to not just having committed an act of arson, but having committed it on behalf of the Russian intelligence services. And it's not very reassuring either, I don't think, that both the Russian ambassador in London and Dmitry Medvedev, the former president, have publicly denied any Russian involvement, which shows a sort of guilty conscience whether or not this particular case is arson and sabotage by them or not. It doesn't matter in a sense. It's the fear and it's the vulnerability that this reveals about our critical national infrastructure from such activities.
So it is possible that Russia could be behind it, in your view?
Yes, I think what Russia is doing at the moment is it's using proxies. In fact, in this Dylan Earl case that I mentioned to you, and you remember also there were some incendiary devices found on a freight aircraft that landed, I think, in the Midlands, that they are conducting these kinetic operations, and it can't be ruled out in any case. There was also a strange fire at a British aerospace factory in Wales that was producing 155mm shells, which are the key ones for the Ukrainian army. So I think there's a general sense that we are under attack and that there may well be foreign intelligence involvement in some of these cases.
Do you think the counter-terrorism police wouldn't be involved if it was sort of straightforward who was to blame?
I don't know exactly their procedures, but it certainly sounds as though they are looking for potential sabotage or arson involved here. Whether that is state-sponsored or not, we'll have to see.
And you talked about Russia using proxies to attack countries like Britain. Who are these proxies? Where do they find them?
Well, they tend to recruit them online. They tend to be third country nationals. You saw the Bulgarian case, which played out here recently in court, and the citizens of Bulgaria were found guilty of working for Russian intelligence. I think they do it online. I think they're linked with organised crime. I was told the other week by an American contact that the Americans suspect that Albanian organised crime groups in Britain are being cultivated by Russian intelligence. And it's a way of, compensating for the fact that a lot of their officers have been expelled from London and other Western European capitals, but also increases the deniability, the so-called plausible deniability of these operations, which involve really quite serious criminality.
And if Russia could well have nothing to do with this outbreak of fire and the chaos that it's caused, but it has advertised to the Kremlin, hasn't it, how vulnerable some of our key infrastructure is. That will be helpful to Putin, won't it?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a standing requirement, if you like, of Russian intelligence operations in the UK to assess weak points in our national critical infrastructure, and particularly, as we've seen before, fibre optic cables under the sea, which carry huge amounts of data. And I think even if this is a case of just old equipment or an accident, it does, as you say, exactly highlight just how vulnerable this is. And that will definitely be put into Russian intelligence's planning and possibly the planning of other hostile intelligence services on British soil.
All at a time when, of course, Putin has, many people think, been emboldened by Donald Trump in the White House. To what extent has he been given a lift by the recent conversation earlier this week?
Massively, I would say. And I think in terms of Britain, it's very important to understand that now America seems to have sailed off in the direction of Russia and Putin's objectives in Ukraine. Britain is now seen as probably the strongest ally of Ukraine in the world, and the one which the Russians would most like to attack and to vilify. in order to deter others. And I think this will result in Russian intelligence operations and other hostile Russian activity towards Britain growing because of Trump's attitude to Russia, which seems to be to kowtow and to compromise on fundamental values and issues.
Just while you're on, has Donald Trump paid the £290,000 he owes you in legal fees after his lawsuit against your firm over the allegations in your dossier was dismissed?
It won't surprise you, Kathy, to hear that he hasn't, and that on the 1st of April we go back to the High Court to get a final costs order against Donald Trump in a case he brought against us in this country and is now trying to wash his hands of, having lost it and having been punished by the court several times, including in terms of costs.
1st of April, an inauspicious date, but you'll be hoping not, I'm sure. Christopher Steele, thank you very much for joining us. Well, let's go now to Ben Clatworthy, transport and travel correspondent for The Times, who's in the studio with us. Ben, what is the very latest on what we know about this fire and the disruption that it's caused?
So what we know in the last couple of hours is that the power has been restored to Heathrow, which is very positive news. However, the airlines are being very cautious in what they say in terms of what they're going to be able to deliver in the next 24 hours. Heathrow have also been quite nuanced that while the power's back, they want to know that it's a reliable source of power, that basically there's not going to be another blackout. National Grid say that they have basically done a patch to restore the power, and therefore they are being very careful. The airlines are being very careful. They don't want a repeat of what happened. It is positive news. Within the last couple of minutes, though, Sean Doyle, the chief executive of British Airways, has put out a statement where he says that passengers who are travelling with the airline in the coming days should expect disruption, not least because of the fact that their planes are all over the network. And in fact, we're seeing that Heathrow say that some flights will resume later today. That will most likely be long-haul operations that are flying into the airport that will be able to operate.
Interesting. Breaking news. Instantly, Ben leaps to his phone to see that breaking news on Heathrow Airport resuming some flights later today, they hope.